We are following the Caucasian highway. In the previous episode, we arrived from Dariali to Zhinvali. Now, we will move from Zhinvali to Zedazani. After that, we will carry on with our journey through the Kakheti Ridge to Hornabuji and see the fortress towns and monasteries that were built within a one-day walking distance from each other. Prior to the great geographical discoveries, until Europe discovered the sea route to India and China, the primary means of transporting cargo were caravans. A caravan may have had more than 500 horses, camels, donkeys, mules, and caravan riders. In fact, it was a moving, trading city whose success depended on proper planning and travel supplies. The head of the caravan was like the manager of a large trading company. And until he was allowed to take that position, he had to travel to numerous countries and gain considerable experience. Along the trade route, there was a town, castle, or monastery guarding the caravans against pirates located at distances within a one-day walk between them. Merchants had to pay a fee in exchange for security. The caravan was obliged to follow only the way shown by state officials and enter the appropriate points where supplies were replenished and the taxes were paid. Deviation from the route or bypassing in order to avoid taxes was considered an unforgivable crime for which the leader of the caravan could even be sentenced to death. Those who controlled the Silk Road routes possessed both money and power, and the great wars that started under various pretexts started precisely to capture these trade routes. Today, we orient ourselves according to modern roads. Therefore, many may wonder why the caravan moving from Zhinvali to Hornabuji should pass Zedazeni, which is situated on the top of a mountain. Its peacefulness is disturbed only by special visitors. However, in the Middle Ages, there was lively traffic here. One of the branches of the Silk Road, namely the central road connecting Kartli and Kakheti, started near the walls of this fortress, where the road ends today and people park their cars. The caravan deporting Zhinvali would ascend the mountain of Zedazeni and then follow the wide trail to the east. This road was once trodden by camels, donkeys, and horses, but today we will travel it by bicycle. This road was very convenient for caravans as it followed the Kakheti Ridge and did not have to cross rivers and valleys at every step. In addition, it was protected from pirates because there were fortresses or fortified points within 15 to 20 kilometers of each other, a comfortable walking distance per day. Due to the changed geopolitical situation and new geographical discoveries, the Dariali-Hornabuji highway lost its function. One medieval sailing ship could carry 2 to 3 times more cargo than a caravan consisting of 500 camels. Consequently, the fortresses and the towns along the road were emptied and destroyed. This road, which was traveled by merchant caravans, later became a haven for pirates. In the 17th and 18th centuries, captives were taken to North Caucasus in this way. The Zedazeni Monastery itself had become a headquarters for pirates. Early in the morning, we left Zedazeni. A little rain got in our way, and we see that the road is no longer the same as in the times of the caravans. Trees are growing on the road, and in some places, there was no path for a bicycle, so we needed to carry it. Nevertheless, in the evening, we reached Mamkoda, right where the river Gldaniskhevi divides the Kakheti Ridge in two and creates a narrow passage from Tbilisi to Erzotianeti. There is the Mamkoda Monastery on top of the mountain and overlooking the entire area. Mamkoda is located at a strategic crossroads. On the one hand, it was the natural gateway at the narrowest part of the road from north to south, where the mountain and the plains meet, and at the same time, it closed the central highway from Kartli to Kakheti. The caravan would stay for the night in Mamkoda, and in the early morning, it would set out for Martkopi along the Kakheti Ridge. A well-loaded caravan traveled an average of 4 to 5 kilometers per hour and covered 20 to 30 kilometers per day. However, if necessary, it could cover 40 to 50 kilometers. So it was a 1 or 2 day ride from Zhinvali to Zedazeni. To the right, below, there is Tbilisi. When we follow the Caucasian route to Georgia, we cannot bypass Tbilisi. Tbilisi is the cornerstone of Vakhtang Gorgasali's concept and his main political legacy. According to legend, the founding of Tbilisi is associated with the hot sulfur springs coming out of the ground, which are abundant in the city. The baths built on these waters are one of the most important sites and a business card of modern Tbilisi. Vakhtang Gorgasali wounded a pheasant while hunting, but the bird fell in the sulfur water and healed. The king was fascinated by the healing properties of the water, and he also liked the surroundings. He founded a city here. The name Tbilisi is also associated with these warm waters. In fact, people have lived in the vicinity of Tbilisi since ancient times. However, it was Vakhtang Gorgasali who assessed the strategic location of this city, discerned its military, political, and economic significance, and established Tbilisi as the capital of Georgia more than 1,500 years ago. Tbilisi is the political successor of Mtskheta. Tbilisi was an ordinary small settlement where there was already big cities around it: Rustavi, Samsvilde, Urbnisi, Uplitsikhe, Necresi, and, of course, the capital of Kartli, Msketa. The initial function of Tbilisi was to protect Msketa. In the 4th century, King Varis Bakur of Kartli built a fortress on the site of the present-day Narikala, and a once ordinary settlement near the warm waters became a strategically fortified military point. We are now at the National Scientific Library. This painting on the wall may seem like a childish rebus to many. In fact, it is the Peuteker's Tabula, one of the most important maps in the history of cartography. This map was first used by the ancient Romans, and then it was rediscovered in the 13th century. It covers an area of approximately 200,000 kilometers from Britain to China, and it lists 550 cities and 3,500 important sites, chapels and lighthouses, among others, and everything that may have been necessary for the traveler. In our case, we are interested in the fact that this map shows Iberia, Albania, Colcheti, and also the cities of Iberia or Georgia, Rustavi, and Armartsike. Between these two cities, scholars read the name of another settlement, Tbilisi. It is not a big city, but a smaller settlement. It is suggested that the name Tbilisi is a distorted form of Tbilisi or Tbilisi. At the end of the 4th century, Kartli came under the rule of Persia, and the Persian Shah appointed his representative, called Pidiaksh, as the overseer of the kings of Kartli and the de facto head of the country. The strategic importance of Tbilisi was appreciated by the Persians, and the first Pidiaksh chose the fortress built by Varis Bakur in Tbilisi as his residence. In the 5th and 6th centuries, a great transformation began in Georgia. Significant economic, social, and political changes took place in the country. A new era and new relations created favorable conditions for the development of urban life and strengthened the state economically. This enabled Vakhtang Gorgasali to build a great deal of cities and roads in parallel with the incessant wars, which meant a giant leap in the development of the country. Due to the strategic location of the new economic reality, a large trade workshop center was built around the Tbilisi fortress, which was once built to protect Msketa. Its importance was growing day by day. Trade routes passed through Tbilisi in all directions. At the same time, those who owned Tbilisi controlled the Dariali Gate and claimed dominance in the Caucasus. For centuries, the center of Kartli was Msketa and Dariali was controlled by Msketa. After the preferment of Tbilisi, Msketa lost its strategic importance. Its political function shifted to Tbilisi. As a result, Msketa was getting smaller and Tbilisi was growing, but Msketa was a religious center of national importance, which was well seen and appreciated by Vakhtang Gorgasali. He built a stone temple on the site of the Svietiskhoveli wooden church. At the same time, he launched a long and grueling war to drive the Persians out of Tbilisi, which eventually ended in his victory. However, this only started the centuries-long wars for the conquest of Tbilisi, as Tbilisi was an important military point and economic center in the Caucasus. It can be said that Tbilisi was the key to the Caucasus. Tbilisi was a strategic place for which there was international interest, and this defined the geopolitical function of the Georgian state. When talking about the military political importance of Tbilisi, we must mention two cities, Rustavi and Samsvilde. These cities are older than Tbilisi, but after Tbilisi became the capital, they became even more important for the country as they were part of Tbilisi's defense system. According to Georgian historical sources, Rustavi was built by the wife of the legendary ancestors of Georgians, Kartlos, for her son. At the end of the 4th century, King Turdat, son of Revi, king of Kartli, built an irrigation canal from the Mtkvari to the Karia Valley, which originated in Rustavi and made agriculture flourish in this area. Vakhtang Gorgasali appointed a bishop in Rustavi, and with the fortification of Tbilisi, he began the construction of the Rustavi fortress, which was to protect Tbilisi from the southeast. In addition, Rustavi had a trade function. Trade routes passed through it, one through Gareja to Hornabuji, and the other to Azerbaijan. The latter still operates today. This city is Samsvilde. It is one of the oldest cities in Georgia, and archaeological excavations prove that people lived here 6,000 years ago, and maybe even earlier. Samsvilde is the largest and best preserved old Georgian city. It is not possible to understand the history of Georgia without getting to know Samsvilde. It is located 60 kilometers southwest of Tbilisi, close to present-day Tetritskaro. In ancient times, the place for the city was chosen first and foremost for safety. And indeed, Samsvilde was built on a high, rocky mountain range at the confluence of the Chivchavi and Khrami rivers, and it is totally inaccessible on 3 sides, while the 4th side was protected by the wall. The city consisted of 3 parts. Craftsmen and ordinary citizens lived outside the wall. The district for the nobles began from the gates of the first wall. Finally, the easternmost part was defended by a citadel with a 6-meter thick wall. The height of the wall today is more than 12 meters, although in the past it would have been much higher. Inside the main wall, there was the most well-protected large space where several thousand people could take refuge if needed and endure long sieges. There were royal chambers and churches. Huge reservoirs of water were built into the ground, and they were filled by pipes made of clay. There were also garrison dwellings and storehouses for supplies. The ruins of a 3-story palace are preserved. It was securely guarded. Its balconies overlooked a huge area. It had a magnificent view of Khrami and Chivchavi canyons, where the griffin vultures live and where there are beautiful waterfalls. In peacetime, people would have enjoyed these sights immensely. Samsvilde was a rather large city by the Middle Ages. Its length was about 2.5 kilometers, and it was 400 or 500 meters wide. There were 7 churches in the city. From the cobbled central street, narrow lanes led to residential areas where boulders from ruined houses are seen. Wild vines and figs growing in the yards remind us that once upon a time there lived people who made wine and raised toasts. The ruins of several 2-story houses are preserved. They probably had storerooms on the 1st floor, maybe cellars as well, and people lived on the 2nd floor. There are traces of fireplaces in the walls. There is a cemetery in one corner of the city. The people who once lived here are depicted on the tombstones. This is a wine jug. It looks like this person loved wine. This is a small glass of wine, and that is a bullhorn, very appropriate to carry while traveling. This is a dagger, and that is a rifle. And here are the cartridge cases and the sword. He wears a choka, tunic, and a hat. He had a good rifle and a good horse. He chased the enemy, he raised his children, he drank wine, and he raised toasts. He was a good man. May he rest in peace. There were settlements around Samsvilde as well. There are many caves in the Khrami and Chivchavi canyons, which have been used for living and hiding since ancient times. It seems that Samsvilde was a well-protected, economically strong, and habitable city. This is why people lived here for millennia. Samsvilde protected and strengthened the Kornabuji-Dariali Central Highway from the south. In the Khrami Gorge, you can still see the old ox cart road, which is paved with cobblestones. The whitewashed towers of the old bridges, which were 3 meters wide and 25 meters long, are also preserved. Samsvilde was an important center in the 5th century. King Archil, the grandfather of Vakhtang Gorgasali, handed over Samsvilde to his son Mirdad. Sagdut Vakhtang's mother was baptized a Christian here, and it is also probable that Vakhtang Gorgasali was born in Samsvilde. Samsvilde has always been a city of great military and economic importance, but it acquired special strategic importance after Tbilisi became the capital, as it was the strongest outpost on the road from the south to Tbilisi. All the central governments paid great attention to keeping Samsvilde under their control, and this is reflected in the fact that the first church in Samsvilde was built by Vakhtang Gorgasali's mother. We visited Tbilisi, Mskere, Rustavi, and Samsvilde, which were the strongholds of the Dariali-Kornabuji Highway, and returned to the Kakheti Ridge. Ahead, there is Martkopi, a village with an ancient history and with a magnificent monastery complex. The construction of this monastery is also associated with Vakhtang Gorgasali. Martkopi means living in solitude. In the first half of the 6th century, one of the Assyrian fathers, Anton, settled on a mountain above the church and spent the last 15 years of his life on a pillar. Because of his solitary life, he was called Mamkoda, living alone, and this place was called Martkopi. According to legend, Father Anton brought an icon of the Savior, made of clay, from Edessa. The monastery was named after this icon, Ftayeba, the deity. During the invasion of Tamerlong, Bishop Georgi Rustaveli hid the icon in the vicinity of the monastery, but the bishop himself was killed in battle, and since then the icon has not been found. Only a copy of the icon survived, and it was transferred to Sioni in the 19th century. Martkopi was located at a very important crossroads. There was very intense traffic from all 4 sides. Near the monastery of the Martkopi Ftayeba, there was a suitable infrastructure that provided everything necessary for travelers. There was also a hospital here. The king of Georgia in the 13th century, David VII, was cured in the Ftayeba monastery from an acute disease which he contracted in the Mongol army. Naturally, the importance of this place was not lost on Vakhtang Gorgasali, who built a church here, installed a bishop, and laid the foundation for the construction of a large defensive structure. The monastery was surrounded by a wall 2 meters wide and 8 meters high, and almost 1.5 kilometers long. In addition to controlling the main highway, it was the main and last outpost for the protection of Tbilisi from the east until the end of the 18th century. There are many old churches in Georgia, and the church built at the end of the 18th century will not surprise anyone with its antiquity. However, we cannot leave Martkopi unless we see a church with a completely different history, which stands as a symbol of nostalgia for people torn from their homeland. One fine day in 1795, the inhabitants of Martkopi set out to witness an unusual story. Money was sent by the great ruler of Egypt and commander of the Mamluks, Ibrahim Bey Al-Khabar Muhammad, to build a church in the village. Even more amazing was the fact that this great ruler of Egypt, Ibrahim Bey, was the son of the village priest, Abram Shinjikashvili, who was abducted by pirates in 1750 and sold in the slave market of Istanbul. Kidnapping people and similar tragedies were happening almost every day back then, but the son of Martkopi priest who became the ruler of Egypt was not a completely ordinary story. Ibrahim Bey, Abram Shinjikashvili, abducted from Martkopi, ruled the Mamelukes for almost 30 years. He ruled Egypt until he was defeated by Bonaparte. We are leaving the Martkopi Monastery. The next destination is Ujjarma, which was once the capital of Georgia. Vakhtang Gorgasali ruled the country from Ujjarma. The modern road is no longer than the road used in the past. It is about 30 kilometers long. We will follow the old road, which will not be more than 15 kilometers. This distance was covered by a caravan in one day. In the next episode, we will talk about the fortress town of Ujjarma, the fortress town of Borchoma, and the fortress of Verena, which guarded the residence of the king of Georgia on 3 sides. The caravans used to stop and rest there before moving towards Kakheti.